If you're looking for one procedural wood material that you can use to make all sorts of different styles of wood for buildings, for furniture, for handles on utensils, and just household items, this is the tutorial for you. The grain is procedural, the knots are procedural, the color can be edited, all within the same node structure. It's awesome. It's going to help you out a lot. Follow along. You can actually purchase this. I have it up on my Gumroad for $1 for all 12 materials. It helps me continue to make these tutorials, but I digress. We are going to start with a Principal BSDF. Clicking New Material. And we are going to use the Node Wrangler add-on that is enabled for me. So I click on my Principal BSDF. I hit Command T or Control T. And that adds this image in. I do not technically need the image. Delete this. And this is going to go into a noise texture. So I'm going to go Shift A, noise texture right there. And that noise texture is going to go into a Voronoi texture. So I'm going to go Shift A again, Voronoi texture right there. From there, we are actually going to go into two different color ramps. Shift A, search, color ramp, it's right there ready for me. And then I'm just going to Shift D and duplicate that color ramp. We are plugging into this color ramp, the second one, and we can probably go like this just to keep things relatively not too far apart. We are going to go Shift A, brightness contrast, and Shift A, hue saturation. So that is going to be how we're going to do the color. And then from the color ramp here, we are going to take this out and we're going to go bump height. And we're going to plug that into the normal of this Principal BSDF. Now that we have the first part of this built, let's get this looking like grain for wood. We are actually going to come back to this noise texture and we're going to change some of its numbers here. So I have them already made and written down. So I'm just going to plug them in so that it's easier for everyone else. We're setting this to 4D. This noise texture is going to be 4D. And our scale is going to be 5.58. So 5.58. The detail is going to be 4.5. 4.5. The roughness is going to stay at around 0.5, and we will put the lacunarity from 2 to 2.7. Now, we are also going to take the Y and Z scale on this up to about 6.5. Let's do that. Let's do 6 point. You could do 6.3, 6.5, somewhere around there. And we're going to drop the X scale to around 0.3 or 0.4. Happy little medium. This is giving us the wood grain that we're kind of looking for. I like this a lot. So now we're at this Voronoi texture, and we are going to set this to 4D as well, and we're going to set it to Manhattan. We are going to set the scale to 6.7. The detail is going to be at 1.3. Roughness is going to be at around 0, and everything else is going to remain the same. We also want this distance to be going into the factor. For the main color ramp, we are going to pick some wood style colors. I'm going to start with this darkest shade here, and we're going to bring up the value, and we're going to pick a kind of a base wood color, something dark. And we are going to add in we'll take this other one and we can brighten this up to something a little bit more peachy. I like that. I'll leave that there. Let's add one more in, and we're going to take this up. This is going to be a slightly darker version of that peachy color. I'm actually going to bring it down a decent amount. And then we're going to add one more in here, and this one is actually going to be even darker than this this high one here, and this one selected. We're going to bring that down, and we're going to bring the saturation down on that as well. The brightness contrast, we are not doing much to. We're just taking that contrast and we're bumping it up by like 0.3, 0.35, and then we are going to take the hue and saturation node. We're going to change a little bit of this. We're dropping the value down to about 0.49, 0.5, like that. Drop that value down a decent amount. The saturation is also going to be a little bit lower. We're going to set that to around 0.7, 0.8. Now, this strength here, way too strong. I'm going to take this strength down to probably about 0.6. And we're going to take the distance down to 0.02. And these colors are blending together a little too much. I want to have a lot more variation going on here. So I am going to take this, I'm going to swap these two, and I'm going to actually lighten this up, and I'm actually desaturated a little bit as well. Give us that beach woody vibe, right? We got like a beach woody vibe going on here. We still have some nice slight bump going on here, which ends up looking good. And it's just some nice simple wood grain. If you want to add more to this, if you bring the scale up on either the Voronoi or the noise texture, you're going to be adding more grain in or less grain to change the scale of the wood that you want. Let's find something that we like a little bit more than where we're at right now. This 5.5 seems fine, but let's add in a little bit more scale on the Voronoi texture just to add some more cells in there, right? I like that. I like that a lot. Let's add in some knots. So to do that, we're actually going to pretty much duplicate this whole setup, but use the same UV coordinates, right? So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go Shift D, take it up above, and I'm going to take this UV coordinates right into the vector. And we are going to Shift Control click on this principled BSDF. That will let us look at the one that we are working on. We're getting rid of the Voronoi texture. We're taking the noise texture itself and plugging it right into this color ramp right here. That Voronoi, get rid of it. We are going to take this texture coordinates and plug it directly into the noise texture. Take this scale, is going to be around 13.5. We're taking the detail down quite a bit. We're going to drop it around to a 1.2, 1.5. We'll do 1.3 just to be right in between. We're also going to take the roughness and bump it up a little bit, 0.65 just to meet in the middle. And the lacunarity is going to be up a little bit. We're going to take this to 4.5. The distortion, we're adding some distortion in. This is going to be around 1.9 to 2. Seems to be the best that I found. We'll do 1.9. Now, I also want to take this color ramp and we're going to drag the black of this color ramp up a decent amount. The last thing that I have here is going to be our roughness. Our roughness on both of these is set to pretty much just below 0.5. So we're going to leave that at around 0.5, maybe even a little higher later. But let's come down to our wood grain and let's drop this around to 0.35, 0.4, something around that area. And that is going to give us a little bit nice shine to this wood. Take the bottom principled BSDF and we're going to go mix shader. And we're actually going to drag that down to the bottom of the mix shader. And we're going to take this principled BSDF, the top, our knots, Command Shift click the mix shader to get a view of our merged materials. Now we just need to mask this out. We want the knots to show up without the grain on them, and we want the grain to kind of be its own thing. So I'm going to take this mix shader back to a color ramp. We got one right here. And from there, I'm going to take the factor of that color ramp into a noise texture. This is going to be our masking for the factor. This is what it's going to look like. We can select this to see what's happening. So we're going to take this 4D for the noise texture. The W is going to be set at 1. This is completely subjective. You can change this to whatever you want to get different knots. We are also going to set the scale down to around 0.4. We're going to take the detail down to 0. The roughness to 0.5, which it already is at. The lacunarity to 0. And the distortion to around 1.2. That should be good. Now, we're not seeing anything. That's because we need to come to this color ramp and we need to kind of add some contrast to this. So I'm going to take this up and I'm going to take this down until we have what we are looking for. We're going to take this scale up a little higher, something like that. This looks like 2.5 seems to be better. You can now see what exactly we're doing. Now we can see that we are masking in wherever there is black, we're getting our knots to come in, and wherever there is white, we are getting our grain to show up. And this is going to take a little bit of mixing of color, a little bit of mixing of other things as well to get this to look how we want it to look. Mess with the darkness of this. I might actually take this up and take this down. Just invert those. And as you can see, we are getting better knots in the wood. It's starting to look a little bit better. And we can actually drop this down a little bit, drop that down a little bit, and it seems to end up kind of merging a little bit better. Now we can always come to this and we can add a little bit more distortion in or take its scale a little further back. Seems to be really not doing anything. The distortion here, I think having this higher will help it merge with the grain of the wood a little bit better. So this is how you can get some nice, easily addable wood, grainy, knotted wood as a texture. And the coolest part of this is the colors are completely editable. Now that we have the base colors added in, we can come into the hue, saturation, and value of these, and we're going to change it a little bit. Or we can come here and we can change this. Control-Shift or Command-Shift-Click, and we can kind of change this wood grain, make it deeper, change this to B-spline to get more of a gradient on this. You can add a little bit more grain in, and then come back to our mix shader, Command-Shift-Click on that. And then I want to come back here and take this detail up on our shader here. So let's take the scale up a little bit even. The detail, we can actually take this detail down. I think that might look a little better. The roughness can be up. And let's take this lacnarity up even more. That's like a noise over the noise that we have going on. And the distortion seems to be pretty good. We don't want it too distorted. I'd say, yeah, 2.6 seems to be good. And let's come back to our mix shader and let's add that in. So this is a decent wood. If you want to mix around with the colors, feel like they might be a little too saturated, but that's where we can come to our saturation node. And we could just drop it down a little bit. So let's take that down to 0.6 on the saturation there. And let's take this saturation down as well. About 0.6. And let's take the value down as well and make this a little bit darker. Let's go value of a 0.3. And let's take the value of the knots down a little bit further to kind of emphasize them as they would be a little darker, but let's keep it a little bit closer to 0.3. If you want the grain to be a little bit distorted as well, you can come to the noise texture here for the grain, and we can start messing with that to add some changes there. And by holding shift and dragging, you can kind of get a little bit of variation. And you can always come to your scale here and you can drop it or widen it depending on the style of your grain as well. But if you lower it down too much, as you can see, it removes the illusion of grain. So we don't want to do that. Yeah, let's crank this up to around 11. That seems to look a lot better. And we can come to this bump strength here, and we can take the distance up a little bit on this as well, just to give a little bit more bump to the knots. So they're casting a little bit more self-shadow. We have these pillars here. This might be kind of cool from the Max Hay pack. Let's drag that in, click on our archway, and shift click onto the cube and hit Control L, link materials. I do like how the wood grain goes with the top here. This looks great. Let's get this second material here. So we're going to click on our object. We're going to come over to the materials section, and we're going to click on this old stone, and we're just going to minimize it so that the whole object is using the same wood material. And as you can see, it adds great detail. So you can get nice up-close shots. Now, this will change based off of how your UVs are done on here. And as you can see, we have our seams all pointing out. So what I might do is I might link select all of these pillars, and I will come up to the pivot point and say individual origins and click RZ and rotate these so those seams are on the back of our viewport, right? We don't want those in front. And while we have those selected, we can also go start with a regular unwrap, and that definitely changes how this texture looks. Now you can see the grain a lot better. You can also come to UV editor and you can go R, hold control, and rotate these so that the grain is going up and down if that's something you're looking for. Once it's built, it's there, it's usable. You don't have to think about it anymore. The next time you want to create something and you want to include wood into it, or, oh, I have a building that needs to be made out of wood, but this wood doesn't look like the wood that you want. Well, that's very easy to change. So now that we have it built, what we can do is we can come here and we can change the brightness, the contrast, and even the hue of this wood. I want it to be redder wood. So you can slide your slider until you get the hue you're looking for. So there's a little bit more on the red side. You take the saturation up, and you can take the value down a little bit. And we can take this, Shift D, and just replace this one with the changes. And now you have like a redder wood, right? To match the scene, the vibe that you're going for. You can use the brightness here. If you want to change the difference between these knots, so this is what the knots look like. If you want them to be darker as well, you can use these values. Brightness, the contrast between the two, you can mess with that as well. If you raise the contrast, just so you know, you will also be raising the saturation. So that might make it look a little funky, but I actually like the way that looks. This is a great simple wood material that you can put together and save as an asset in your library. So we can name this, we'll call it red wood with knots. And then all I have to do is right click on that material's title and click Mark as Asset, Command Save or Control Save your project, and that will now be updated in your library. We have the red procedural wood here. It's just there, ready to use, drag and drop. If we want to go back to our other material of wood, we can do that. Get out of edit mode, come over here and just drag it on. We have all sorts of materials that are in my material pack. We've got an orange plastic. We have oxidized copper. We have a textured gold. This one's really cool. We have scuffed metal, very chrome looking in the full white environment. Not the best, but if I change my background material to be this tiled texture, which my background, as you can see, is not UV'd properly, you can see this material a little better with all of its scuff marks. And I have a cast iron, which has automatic edge detection. So it will add edge wear to any faces that are close together, which gives a realistic wear and tear to your objects. We also have a cobalt, which does the same thing. This is one of my favorite materials that I've made. We have this cracked glowing stone or cracked glowing metal. This one's really cool as well. We have a gold in stone, which would probably look better with the white background. And we have a wood planks material. Now, this wood plank material is based on an image texture. So when we click on this, it is using images, which means that tiling will happen, whereas the fully procedural ones, you won't have to deal with that. We also have this scuffed plastic, which is just a pretty rough material. It's got a high roughness and some surface imperfections to make the edges look like they have, or the faces look like they have, been marred with age and use. All of these materials that I've shown you are in my material pack up on Gumroad for $1. It helps me, but I'm here to help you. I want you guys to be able to create really unique things without having to suffer through figuring out the node structures. But I digress. That is how I make my procedural wood textures. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope this video is helpful for you. If you download the material pack that I have, please tag me in whatever you make. I'd love to see your art. If you have a specific material that you're struggling with that you want to know how to make, that you've seen other people do, let me know as well. I would love to help you out with that. There is another cool thing I did want to show you guys. This orange plastic one, if you crank up the metallic on this part and you take the color darker and you lower the saturation, it can look like, and you could raise the metallic on the orange as well, just slightly, not as much. It can look like paint that is being worn off with time. So that's another little secret with some of my materials. Just slight changes will change the entire material to look super unique. So if you have a car you're working on and you want it to be worn down, instead of having to go and mix all these shaders to make sure that it's got the edge wear, and it's like, no, dude, just use this. It's a drag and drop. It's a drag and drop, and it's got the automatic edge detection. Where there would most likely be wear and tear is where it will show up on here, which is on edges and on faces that protrude. This is one of my favorite materials that I have made. Of the material pack here, 12 materials that you can drag and drop and use, and they're total. You can use them in anything, even client work. The price tag on it is just to help support me in creating this for you. But I want to keep it as cheap as possible, so we'll do $1. And again, I completely appreciate you guys. Have a good afternoon. I will see you guys later. Are you looking for better materials to use in Blender? Check this out. I've created some amazing materials that you can drag and drop right into your projects, taking your scenes and models to the next level with these insanely detailed materials. This sale ends soon. Check it out.